A simple man walks into the building. No one greets. No one knows. And she, a new employee full of confidence, ordering, disdainful, and unaware, she has just made the biggest mistake of her life. The next day, the whole company is silent, as he stands before them, as the highest authority, a lesson in arrogance, a bow to start over. Will she have time to correct her mistake? Radio special, "Who did you think you were?" The sound of a car horn sounded softly in the early morning. The city began to wake up, the glass buildings reflecting the early morning sunlight. At a central intersection, a man stepped out of an old silver SUV. No one paid attention to him. A middle-aged man wearing a white shirt, gray pants, carrying a brown paper bag. He pushed open the door and entered the high-rise building of Miller Group, a leading technology corporation worth billions of dollars. The security guard nodded, he nodded slightly, and went straight to the elevator. No one called him chairman. In fact, no one thought he was a big boss. That was what he wanted. James Miller liked simplicity. He liked to feel office life like a normal person. Up to the 10th floor, he went straight to the pantry area, where employees often stopped to make coffee before work. He placed the bag of homemade cookies on the table, carefully opened the lid, and began to prepare a cup of cappuccino. The coffee machine hummed steadily, blending into the busy morning atmosphere. The pantry door swung open. A young girl walked in, neatly dressed, her hair tied up, her face somewhat stern. She was Melissa, a new employee who had just been admitted to the HR department yesterday. She saw James standing in front of the coffee machine. Melissa, in a gruff voice, "You there, are you a maintenance worker? Why are you standing here? This area is for administrative staff, not just anyone can enter." James turned around, smiled slightly, his eyes warm and not showing any dissatisfaction. He handed her the half-brewed cup of coffee. "James, you go first. I can wait." She took the cup of coffee, nodded, but still glanced at him suspiciously. Not knowing who this man was, she could only guess that he was a petty employee. She was not used to people dressing casually in a professional environment. Melissa left. James was still standing there, making a new cup of coffee. He did not look sad nor angry. He was just too used to the judgmental looks. Too used to being misunderstood when living simply in a place full of prejudice about status. The morning passed. James spent time walking around the departments, visiting a few old employees, chatting lightly like a friendly colleague. He didn't have a name tag, and no one thought to ask. Some old people recognized him, but just smiled and greeted him, keeping it a secret out of habit. In the hallway of the 12th floor, where the HR office was located, Melissa was holding a stack of files, frowning in annoyance. She had just been assigned by her direct boss to inventory personnel data, by area a boring and time-consuming job. She saw James walking past empty-handed, dressed simply. Without thinking much, she called out, "Melissa, you there? That's right, you. Take these files down to the warehouse for me. G floor, storage room number 4. Hurry up, I have work to do." James stopped, looking into her eyes. Still a gentle, calm gaze. He picked up the stack of files without saying anything. He just nodded slightly and turned away. A long-time employee named Lamb passed by and witnessed everything. He frowned, intending to stop James, but James just shook his head slightly. Lamb understood, smiled slightly, and left. James brought the files down to the place and personally arranged them on the storage shelf. No one asked. No one requested. He only did it out of kindness, and perhaps because he wanted to hear once again how arrogant people could be when they didn't understand who they were dealing with. That afternoon, Melissa passed by the pantry and saw him wiping the table after lunch. She pouted. Melissa, whispering loudly enough to be heard, What a petty employee taking on everything. Don't know how to keep boundaries. James heard but didn't react. He just continued to wipe away every remaining drop of coffee, his eyes seeming to be thinking about something far away. The next morning, the entire HR department received an urgent email from the senior management department. The message was about an important meeting with the group chairman James Miller taking place at 900 in the central conference room on the 15th floor. All new employees and managers involved in internal affairs were required to attend. Melissa was typing a report when she received the email. She skimmed through it, frowning. Melissa to her colleague. Chairman Miller, I've never met him. He must be the old boss type, cold and distant. She sneered. In her mind, the image of a chairman was always associated with someone who wore a designer suit, drove a luxury car, had an assistant following him around, and always gave orders from a genuine leather chair. Little did she know that the person she had ordered around yesterday would be the one who would enter that conference room as the head of the entire group. By 8:50, everyone was there. Melissa sat near the end of the table, her shirt pressed, her notebook in her hand. She felt confident. A young, energetic, outspoken employee in the group. 9 o'clock sharp. The door opened. There were no hurried footsteps. No bodyguards, no secretaries. Just a man walked in. His hair was slightly gray at the temples. He was wearing a white shirt and gray slacks. His eyes were worldly, neither hasty nor stern. Melissa was stunned. Her hand tightened on the notebook. Her mouth fell open, her eyes widening as she realized that the man was the little guy she had ordered yesterday. James Miller walked straight to the head of the table. He needed no introduction, no microphone, no podium. He simply stood there smiling at everyone. James. Hello, everyone. I'm James Miller. Thank you for being on time. Today, we're not going to talk about the quarterly report nor about strategy. I want to talk about the culture of this company and about how we treat each other. The room was dead silent. No one dared to move. Melissa felt as if a bucket of cold water had just been poured over her head. She bowed her head, her heart pounding. James slowly. At Miller Group, we don't differentiate between new and old. We don't differentiate between directors and janitors. Our culture puts kindness and respect first. I've been a security guard, I've cleaned offices, I've been sent to pour water. Not because anyone looked down on me, but because I wanted to understand each person's job. And today I continue to do that. Only I do it as a leader. Many eyes looked at each other silently. Some old employees bowed their heads in thought. As for Melissa, she couldn't even look up. The memory of her every word, every look, every command appeared like a knife cutting deep into her self-esteem. James walked up to Melissa. Without blaming her, he gently placed his hand on her shoulder. James, we can make mistakes, as long as we know how to recognize and change afterwards. I don't expect my employees to be perfect. I just hope they learn how to be human before they do their jobs. A round of applause rang out from the corner of the room. Then it gradually spread. A meeting without dry instructions, only a lesson in humility. A light touch to the ego of those who still judge others by their appearance. Melissa still couldn't say a word. But something else began to sparkle in her eyes. Remorse and realization. The meeting ended in solemn silence. Not the heaviness of the punishment, nor the gloating of the bystanders, but the feeling of touching something deep, the so-called limit of arrogance. James left the meeting room first. No one saw him off. No assistant escorted him. He walked slowly, silently to his private office. Behind him were people who were facing themselves. Melissa still sat there stiff, her eyes staring blankly at the pure white notebook in front of her. Every page was clean. Only her heart was in chaos. At exactly 11 a.m., she received a call. The extension number was from the president's office. She hesitated for a few seconds, then pressed the answer button. The secretary's voice rang out softly. "Secretary, Ms. Melissa, President James invites you to room 21B at 11:15 for a private discussion. It's just a light conversation, don't worry too much." Melissa hung up. Her hands trembled slightly. Her heart was pounding. She had never felt so small in her life. Not because she was afraid of being fired, but because she knew she had underestimated others, especially people she didn't understand at all. 11:10. She stood in front of the door to room 21B, hesitated for a few seconds, then knocked. Inside, James was sitting drinking tea. There were no files on the table. There was only a pot of hot tea and 2 cups. "James, please sit down, have some tea, calm your mind." Melissa nodded, sitting down on the chair. Her eyes did not dare to look straight at him. Melissa whispering, "I sincerely apologize for everything. I have no excuse." James smiled, without interrupting. Just gently poured tea into her cup. The smoke rose fragrant. "James, I know you are new, passionate, frank. But without humility, all abilities are meaningless. A large corporation does not need more talented people, but needs people who know how to behave." Melissa lowered her head, her eyes starting to redden. She did not protest. No excuses. She accepted. James put down his teacup, looking straight into her eyes. His voice was low and calm. "James, you will be transferred to the branch in Fairfield town. 3 months, not for punishment, but for learning." Melissa looked up, surprised. Fairfield, a small riverside town more than 150 kilometers from the headquarters. The branch there handles labor cases, issues related to factory workers and local residents. A far cry from the modern, comfortable offices she had known. Melissa, voice trembling. "I understand. This is my chance to make amends. Thank you for not firing me." James stood up. He put his hand on her shoulder again, as he had done in the conference room. James, people who can recognize their mistakes deserve a second chance. Melissa left the room. The afternoon sun streamed through the long hallway, illuminating her face, which was covered in sweat and tears. But in her eyes, there was no longer arrogance, only determination. A week after her private meeting with President James Miller, Melissa left town. She boarded an early bus carrying only a small suitcase, a few business suits, and a new notebook. Gone were the expensive high heels. Gone was the designer handbag she had shown off to her colleagues. Just her simple, quiet, and thoughtful. On the way to Fairfield, a small town near the western border, Melissa looked out the window. Fields stretched out. Hills loomed in the mist. A world completely different from the one she had lived in. Fairfield had no glass buildings, no luxury cars or large offices. The Miller Group branch here was just an old 2-story building with a faded sign, but the atmosphere was friendly. No one greeted her with a file or a name tag. Just an elderly security guard, smiling kindly, pointing to the reception area. "Security guard. Are you a transferee from the headquarters? Go to Lena's office. She's preparing food for the guys in the warehouse." Melissa nodded. She wasn't used to such a close conversation. Before, all she heard was, "Yes, reporting to you," or "I'm handling it right now." Now she was just an ordinary employee in a place closer to real life than ever. Lena, the head of the administrative department at Fairfield, was a woman in her 40s wearing a frayed collared shirt wearing frosted glasses and her hair neatly tied up. She didn't ask Melissa which school she went to, nor did she care what position she had held. She just said briefly, "Lena, you just help me get familiar with the process. The branch is small, no one has any power here. The important thing is to do it properly." Melissa started by entering data for workers on a shift basis. She was assigned a seat near the filing room, hot, dusty, and cramped. No one brought her coffee like at the headquarters, but she received a sincere greeting every morning. "Have you had breakfast yet? Don't forget to wear a mask in the warehouse today. It's dusty. If you have anything to share, just tell Lena." Slowly, Melissa stopped seeing her job as a burden. She learned to bend down when she needed to pick up a fallen file. She learned to say thank you when someone helped her file. She learned to apologize when she accidentally entered the wrong shift number for an elderly worker. One day, it was raining heavily. She and Lena took an umbrella to the backyard to welcome the group of workers who were late for their shift. Melissa held the umbrella for an elderly man whose leg hurt her hands shaking as she helped him inside. He smiled and took her hand. "Are you a girl from the city?" Good-natured, like the president of those girls in the past. "I heard he used to come here to eat with us. No one knew who he was, and he didn't say anything." Melissa stood still. Suddenly, the image of James Miller, with his calm eyes and his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, appeared clearly in her mind. He didn't need to say anything to prove it. He just lived what he believed. And that was how he taught others, not by scolding, but by real experience. The third week in Fairfield, Melissa wrote the first line in her notebook. "Humility is not weakness. It is strength that one can only understand after having been arrogant." That night, she cooked a simple meal for Lena. She said her first words of thanks in a sincere voice. "Melissa, I used to think I was good. I used to think I knew how to do things. Now I see. Being a good person is harder than being a good employee." Lena just smiled. "Pour more tea." No one said anything more. But from that moment on, Melissa was no longer the same person. 3 months in Fairfield passed faster than Melissa expected. From a proud person, she learned to slow down. From an employee who only knew orders, she learned to listen and sympathize. Every day, she wrote a few lines in her notebook, not to report, but to remember the lessons from the simple life around her. On the last day, the entire Fairfield office held a small farewell party for her. No flowers, no banners, no director speaking. Just sandwiches, hot tea, and lots of sincere wishes. Sister Lena hugged her. Without saying much, she just slipped a piece of paper into her hand. "Lena, someone asked me to give this to you when I left Fairfield." Melissa opened it. It was a short, handwritten line. The handwriting was familiar. "James Miller's. Good job. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to never look down on anyone again. See you at the main office." Melissa smiled, tears rolling down her face. She folded the piece of paper, putting it in the notebook she would never lose. She got in the car and left Fairfield as the sun was just starting to rise. Behind her was the small town. Ahead was a new future. And in her heart, no longer was there regret, but there was a promise to live kindly, starting with the smallest things. The bus horn sounded in the middle of the city. Melissa got off at the stop near the Miller Group headquarters. She no longer had the haughty look she had 3 months ago. Her hair was tied back. Her shirt was simple. She carried a small cloth bag, not a leather handbag. She stood in front of the familiar glass building which used to make her hold her head high every morning, but now made her bow slightly when she entered. Not because she was embarrassed, but because she understood that humility does not make people short, but makes them truly respected. The security guard nodded at her. She also bowed. A receptionist looked at her in surprise. Receptionist: "Oh, Melissa, you're back. I heard you were transferred." "Ah, No, I mean, welcome back. Melissa smiled. She didn't blame anyone anymore. She even felt sorry for her former self, who valued status so much that she ignored kindness. She went straight to the HR department. As soon as she opened the door, she was met with surprised looks. Some nodded slightly. Some glanced and then turned away. No one showed contempt, but they did not completely trust her either. Melissa understood. Trust must be rebuilt. It cannot be restored with just an apology. Ms. Trin, the deputy manager, stepped forward extending her hand. Her eyes remained distant, but there was clear politeness. Ms. Trin, welcome back. The president has given instructions. You will work in the new employee support team. From today, your task is to guide new people to the company, help them integrate. Melissa was a bit surprised. She thought she would return to her old chair doing what was once familiar, but now she was being assigned to work with people she had once despised. She nodded. No objections, no questions. Just one sentence, Melissa, I understand. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. That afternoon, she sat in the training room listening to the interns' awkward questions. Someone didn't know how to type. Someone spilled coffee on the conference table. Someone called her janitor because she was wiping the whiteboard after training. Melissa didn't get mad. No offense. She just smiled, handed the person a towel, and said, Melissa, it's okay. I made mistakes too. As long as you learn something from them. That's good. A boy in the group of interns named Dan, fresh out of school, timidly asked Dan Yu. You were the one who was sent to the Fairfield branch, right? Is it true that the president personally taught you the lesson? Melissa nodded. She did not hide it. She did not deny it. She even carried James's handwritten note in her notebook, as a souvenir. Melissa. That's right, and thanks to that, I really knew who I needed to become. Dan nodded. Admiration appeared on her face, not because of the title, but because of the story behind this woman. Melissa looked up at her watch. It was almost 5 o'clock. She was about to end her first training session when the intercom rang. The receptionist's voice rang through the phone. Receptionist President James Miller invites Melissa to the 20th floor. Private meeting room, right now. She put the receiver down. Her heart was beating softly. It was no longer fear like the first time, but readiness. This time she would see him, not to defend herself, but to thank him. Melissa knocked on the door of the conference room on the 20th floor. The door opened. James Miller was sitting alone with a cup of hot tea and a thin file in front of him. No assistant, no secretary, no formality. James, come in, Melissa. I'll wait for you. She walked in. Sit down on the opposite chair, keeping her back straight but her eyes full of respect. It wasn't like 3 months ago. Her eyes were no longer fearful nor arrogant. James smiling. I've read the report from Fairfield and Lena's handwritten letter. He gently pushed the file toward her. Melissa glanced through it. Inside were simple but sincere handwritten lines. Melissa doesn't just do good work. She listens, shares, and is willing to bend over. I believe she's not the same person anymore. She looked at James. He nodded slightly. James, I tried you. I was disappointed. But what made me decide not to fire you? Because I saw something very rare in your eyes that day. Sincerity. Melissa bowed her head, unable to hide her emotions. Her voice trembled slightly. Melissa, I'm grateful, not just for being kept, but because I was taught how to be a human being before I started my career. James was silent for a few seconds. Then he stood up, walked to the window, and looked down at the city lights. James, we live in a world where everyone is in a hurry. Hurry to advance. Hurry to assert themselves. But honey, sometimes, knowing how to stop, bow, and apologize is the fastest way to grow up. He turned around, holding out his hand. James. Welcome back. Melissa squeezed his hand. No need for another word. She understood that. From now on, every action she took would carry her name, not just her own, but the entire culture of the company that James maintained. The first week after returning to the main office, Melissa started working with a tight schedule. No one forced her. She volunteered to work with the new HR support department full-time. She printed documents, guided procedures, taught how to use the timekeeping system, and even sat with each new intern, a job that she had previously considered unworthy of her ability. At first, some of her old colleagues still sneered as they passed by. Someone whispered, "You must know better now. See, being arrogant will eventually get you bullied." Melissa heard everything, but she did not respond. She just smiled. Every day she worked diligently, not pretending to be better than anyone else, nor trying to prove herself. She understood true prestige is not in the business card but in the behavior repeated every day. One time during an internal training session, the system had an error that caused the entire group's reports to be deleted. Many interns panicked. Melissa did not blame anyone. She sat back after class with an intern named Coy, checking each number by handprinting. Coy was surprised. Coy. Melissa, you were the one who was transferred for 3 months, right? I heard you were once warned about your attitude. I can't believe someone like you was like that. Melissa laughed. For the first time, she didn't feel hurt when someone mentioned the past. Melissa, yes, I made mistakes, but thanks to that I know how to live properly. That sentence almost spread very quickly, not like a bad rumor, but like a silent proof that people who know how to change deserve respect. After a few weeks, the atmosphere around Melissa changed. There were no more whispers, no more half-doubting looks. Instead, there was respect, not because of power, but because she had fallen before and knew how to stand up properly. Early in the morning, when Melissa had just put her coffee cup on the table, the internal phone rang. She picked up. On the other end of the line was Ms. Trin, the deputy head of the Human Resources Department. Ms. Trin, Melissa, this week, the company welcomes a group of strategic interns from many universities. Orders from the president's office. You will be the main instructor. The content is corporate culture and internal communication skills. Starting Thursday morning. Melissa was stunned. She had never taught a large group of people before. She had never been assigned such a large orientation session. This was not just a responsibility, but a public assessment of her change process. She prepared that afternoon. Every presentation slide, every note, every practical example was designed by Melissa based on her own experience. She did not intend to say anything empty, just wanted to convey one thing. Kindness is not a slogan. It's a daily choice. Thursday morning. The 5th floor conference room was packed. More than 40 interns were sitting neatly. A few middle managers were also there to observe. Melissa walked in no name tag, no designer clothes. Just a simple white shirt and a slight smile. She started with a true story about a girl who used to look down on others, about a 3-month trip that changed everything, and about a boss who didn't scold, didn't fire, just used tolerance to teach kindness. The whole room listened in silence. No one spoke privately. No one looked at their phones, because the story in front of them was true. Melissa ended the training with this sentence. Melissa, you will be taught how to write reports, use software, work in teams. But the most important thing here is to learn not to judge others by their appearance. If I have changed, I believe you can do it too. Applause rang out throughout the room. But what Melissa did not know was that in the back corner of the room there was a man sitting quietly observing the whole thing. James Miller, not wearing a suit. No one recognized him. But his eyes, the eyes of a man who had been disappointed, who had been hopeful, now shone with satisfaction. He walked out before the training ended. On the way back to the office, he only said to the secretary walking beside him, "James, she deserves it. Give her a new assignment. This time, it's official." The following Monday, Melissa received the official announcement. She was appointed as head of training and internal culture, a position that was not too high, but had a direct impact on the spirit and people of the company. She did not throw a party, no big announcement, just sent a brief email thanking all her colleagues who had accompanied her. In her heart, the joy this time did not come from the title, but from knowing she deserved it. In her first week in the new position, Melissa began reviewing new intern applications. A name caught her attention: Jolie Tran, a senior majoring in human resource management. Good profile, high scores, full achievements. Along with a comment from her homeroom teacher, talented but overconfident, needs to be more realistic. Melissa smiled. An image of herself 3 months ago appeared in her mind. 3 days later, Jolie officially started working. On the first morning, she wore a designer office dress and expensive high heels, her eyes scanning everyone with an appraising look. At the tea room, Jolie met an elderly employee who was struggling with the coffee machine, unaware that it was Mr. Dung, a veteran employee and warehouse manager. Jolie walked over, frowning. "Jolie, you spilled coffee. Don't know how to clean it. Leave it to me and ask the janitor to clean it up. You shouldn't use the administrative staff's machine without permission." Melissa stood a few steps away, clearly hearing everything. She didn't say anything. She just quietly walked in, took a towel to wipe the coffee stain for Jolie. That afternoon, she called Jolie to her room. She didn't scold her. She just asked gently, "Melissa." "Jolie, what kind of person do you think Mr. Dung is, Jolie?" Indifferently, "Probably just a support staff. I think you're a bit clumsy. It's weird to be like that in a professional company." Melissa nodded. Then she opened the computer screen and showed Jolie the special achievements Mr. Dung, a 15-year employee who was awarded a certificate of merit by James Miller for rescuing data when the server crashed in 2012. A person whose president himself once said, without him, Miller Group would have lost a part of its history. Jolie was stunned. Melissa looked at her, her eyes serious but not cold. "Melissa, in the past, I was like you, judging others by their eyes, taking small things lightly. I paid the price by being away from this place for 3 months. Now I'll give you 3 days to think. Then tell me again, what kind of person do you want to be in this company?" Jolie left the room, her face red. She did not protest nor apologize right away, but in her eyes, there was already a wavering. 3 days after the conversation with Melissa, Jolie returned to the training room. No more high heels. No more designer office dresses. She wore a simple shirt, her hair tied back, and held a thick stack of documents in her hand. Melissa looked at her, smiling slightly. No questions, just waiting. Jolie put the documents on the table, bowed her head. "Jolie, I'm sorry, and I've read all of Mr. Dung's files. I want to start over, not to please anyone, but so I don't have to be ashamed of myself later." Melissa nodded. She knew a circle had closed, and a new one was opening. That week, Jolie volunteered to help the office team. Cleaned the conference room herself. Delivered the files to the warehouse. No more complaining or comparing. Only focused eyes and a spirit of learning. One afternoon, as Melissa walked down the hallway to the top floor, she saw James Miller standing alone by the window. No one was around him. No staff, no secretary. Just a man with a distant gaze looking out at the noisy city below. She walked to his side, saying nothing. After a while, James spoke. "James, Melissa, you kept the fire alive." Melissa turned to look at him, unable to understand what he meant. James smiled and continued slowly, "James, this company doesn't need the best, nor does it need the most loyal, just someone who keeps the original spirit respect, from the security guard to the president." He walked away slowly. When he reached the end of the hallway, he stopped and turned around. "James, I'm retiring. The management will gradually change. I won't be in direct control anymore, but I believe people like you will keep the spirit of this place." Melissa didn't have time to say anything. She just stood there, a lump in her throat. For the first time, she felt what it was like. A legacy that didn't need a plaque to survive. The following week, at a company-wide meeting, James Miller officially announced his retirement from direct management. No one cried. No slogans were shouted. There was only silence, as profound as a farewell. And Melissa, after that speech, became the first person to be called on the council to build a sustainable internal culture. She didn't sit in a high chair, but she was the first person new employees sought out. On her desk, there was always a small piece of paper. James's old handwriting, the ink faded. "Good job. I don't need you to be perfect. Just don't ever look down on anyone again."